Right then, here we go. 6.21 for 6, and Brendon McCullum is on 2.98. He works it to the gap. He's got it. Magnificent. New Zealand have a superstar, a little cricketing master.
Hello and welcome to episode 73 of Radio Cricket. Yes, that's 73, the same number of new excuses that MS Dhoni has invented over the past few days. Speaking to you live from the home of cricket, well, it is my home and I do like to practice my shadow batting in the corridor from time to time. I am Ishant Joshi. Joining me, as always, is the man who was left tragically untold at the IPL auction. He set his base price too high, a rookie mistake. It is James Marsh.
Yes, hello Nishant. Yes, I shouldn't have set my base price at half a Dernbach, and of course this was another disappointment on top of Valentine's Day, which I spent with a selection of beautiful blonde beers, but sadly no human contact whatsoever. But Nishant, how did you spend yours?
Well, dear listeners, I hope you spent Valentine's Day with someone you love, and if you followed me live tweeting the cricket, then you certainly did. James, now as you know, I have an open relationship with my girlfriend, so she doesn't mind that I spend Valentine's Day with 50,000 odd strangers over the internet. And James, of course, in the last week the Winter Olympics have started. They're taking place right now in Sochi in Russia. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the Winter Olympics because for us Indians, they're just another opportunity to watch a different set of sportsmen perform poorly away from home. And of course, this completely coincidentally leads onto our first segment, Subcontinental Homesick Blues. That's one for our Bob Dylan fans out there. I hear he's really big in Bangladesh right now. Now, I know that many of our listeners are Indian, and many of you are also big fans of MS Dhoni, in which case you might want to skip over the next few minutes of our podcast, because it's not going to be Shania Twain style easy listening for you guys. Now, it's now been 3 months since India won a game in any format that doesn't include pointing and laughing at poor countries. It's been nearly 1,000 days since India last won an away test match. Even Ishant Sharma has had a haircut in that time. Now, James, of course, we're referring to New Zealand versus India, that test series which has just concluded. New Zealand beat India 1-0 in this test series, which was, of course, a huge result for the Minnows. That is, to only lose one game. And that's because India have now gone 14 away tests in a row without a win, and Brendon McCullum's innings was the 8th time in the last 12 tests that India have conceded a double century or more. It's like the Indian bowlers are a bunch of dignitaries at a post-match ceremony in the Middle East. They just can't stop handing out gifts. In their last 12 away tests since 2011, India have shipped 700 once, 600 3 times, and 500 4 times. Obviously, this terrible series of results has led to some deep introspection, as you would imagine, especially from the Indian captain MS Dhoni, who has led his team to the most away test defeats in his country's history. In the post-series press conference, Dhoni said, "Compare 8-0 to the last 2 series we have played. There's been plenty of improvement." So, dear listeners, I put it to you. Let's compare these last 2 Indian series to the 8-0 drubbings across Australia and England. First off, in South Africa in December, India lost 1 test and lost 3 ODIs, winning, let me just check, a total of 0 matches. Yes, 0 matches they won across there. Okay, so Dhoni is 0-4 for South Africa. In New Zealand, India lost 4 ODIs and lost 1 test, winning, sorry, my maths isn't so great, but I think that's a total of 0 matches as well. So if my maths is correct, excluding a couple of draws and 1 tie, India have won 0 matches across those 2 tours and lost 9 matches. So Dhoni is right, dear listeners. Of course, India have certainly improved, in the sense that they've improved their opponent's sense of morale even more than they've before. When asked about his team's failures, Dhoni then went on to say, "It is not like making food where you say, okay, salt is missing." So there you have it, folks. After 7 years of international captaincy experience, MS Dhoni has finally sussed that in Test cricket, you can't just go, needs a pinch of Rahul Dravid and a little less Srishant. To put this abomination into a culinary context, if MS Dhoni was trying to make a pizza, he'd currently be staring at a bowl full of yeast and flour, mashing it together madly in a frenzy with his wicket-keeping gloves, then serving it to Indian fans and insisting that raw pizza dough is a traditional Chennai delicacy.
Well, heavens, Nishant, you've certainly peppered him with a few brickbats there. But Nishant, I think you're being a little bit negative because as I looked on Z News on Tuesday morning, the headline there was India retains second place in ICC Test rankings. So I think they really encapsulated the sense of jubilation amongst Indian fans there. But just turning it round a little bit and focusing on the positives for the winning side of the series, New Zealand, of course, we must remember that only just over a year ago they were bowled out for 45 in Cape Town. So Mike Hesson has very much gone from Machiavelli to Messiah in a little over 12 months. And of course it's remarkable if you think of all the criticism the New Zealand coach received, not least, I must admit, from around these parts, for the way he ousted Taylor as captain and imposed McCullum in his place. You really have to take your hat off to him because of A, the way New Zealand have played in general, and B, the improved individual performances that he's managed to get out of both the current and ex-skipper. Hesson used to coach Argentina, and there was a stage when his chances of keeping the Kiwi job looked flakier than Maradona's top lip after a night out. But it's been incredibly impressive the way he's been able to unite this side and bring through such tremendous young players such as Anderson and Neesham. If we just have a look at McCullum's wonder stats, obviously he got a double century in the series. He followed that up with a triple century in the second test, and McCullum also scored 435 runs in the series, which is the fourth highest ever for a Kiwi. And what you have to remember is that he did that in just a 2-match series. And in reality, he did it in just 2 innings. So a stunning effort there. Also, he had this wonderful partnership with Watling, BJ Watling, in the second test for the 6th wicket, a stand of 352, which is a new world record. The previous record for the 6th wicket was 351, set by Mahela and Prasanna Jayawardena against, that was against India as well in 2009. Something of a theme developing here. And, of course, Watling was of course born in South Africa, and if anyone tries to tell you that immigration doesn't have its benefits, just remember that if he'd stayed where he was, he would have been facing this week Mitchell Johnson rather than Ishant and Zahir. So clear benefits of migration there. But just also, obviously, McCullum does take the plaudits, but I mentioned Jimmy Neesham earlier, and he became only the 10th Kiwi batsman to make a century on debut, and only the 7th batsman to do so from any country in history, batting at number 8. And also on that list of batsmen who've made a century on debut at number 8 is Azhar Mahmood, the Pakistan all-rounder, now possibly even better known for being a team captain on our cricket sports quiz Spot the Googly, available on YouTube. Do check it out. But in many respects, Nishant, this has been a tour for India which has had more inconsistencies than Guru Mayapan's statement to the police. But we've seen some really good performances, but also some absolutely terrible ones, and sometimes from the same player. So, Nishant, I think perhaps our listeners will know who I'm alluding to there.
Yes, well, James, of course, the Ishant Sharma versus Jade Dernbach battle is already shaping up to be 2014's version of Steve Smith versus Ravi Jadeja. Who will finish the year 2014 with a higher international bowling average? It's one hell of a close contest in February, with both Ishant and Jade Dernbach flirting between first and second place on a weekly basis. And in this week, the two alleged fast bowlers traded more positions than a cricket enthusiast betting on an IPL game. What was even more remarkable about the past week's title race is that Jade Dernbach didn't even have to get out of bed, as Ishant Sharma first raced miles ahead and a couple of days later decided to even things up a bit. In the past few days, Ishant Sharma has simultaneously done enough to both remind us why he's worth persisting with, at the same time as reminding us why he also has the worst average for any fast bowler who's played more than 50 tests. In the second test at Wellington, Ishant picked up his best ever innings figures of 6 for 51 in the first innings. It was a brilliant display of fast bowling and reminded us all what Ishant is capable of. It's a shame then that in the second innings, Ishant proceeded to pick up his worst ever innings figures of 0 for 164. It was a horrible display of medium pace bowling, reaching as slow as 73 miles per hour, and once again reminding us all what Ishant is capable of. After his first innings 6-wicket haul, Ishant said, "I am the same bowler who bowled against Ricky Ponting in 2007. I don't analyse my bowling a lot because at this stage I'm ahead of the game." And yes, dear listeners, to be fair to Ishant, he definitely was ahead of the game, even if it was only for a paltry 24 hours.
But fear not, India fans, because the aspirin to your migraine, the gazelle breast to your lion, the honey to your Shri will soon be upon us. Yes, the IPL is only a couple of months away, but this week we had the annual cricketing version of 7 weeks spent with Ravi Shastri, a slave, when the IPL auction took place. Now, this year, Nishant, I thought it was actually a bit disappointing in that it seemed that some of the team owners had actually done a bit of research rather than picking their squads by mistakenly leaning on the wrong button after one too many hospitality samosas and Pepsi Maxes. Now, when Dirk Nannes came on the show a while back, he spoke about how odd it was to be a player at the auction because he said for the first time in his life, he just felt like a commodity, a sort of cricketing piece of meat, as it were, Nishant. But for you, although we're both vegetarians, which of this year's buys were the sirloin steaks and which were the KFC buckets?
Yes, James, last week saw the IPL auction, the 2 days in the cricket calendar where cricketers don't mind if overweight Indian men slobber all over them. Now, in our auction preview, which I'm sure you've already read, and if you haven't done already, you can read for posterity at alternativecricket.com, I stressed that the key to this auction was in the work that teams did before it. Now, most of the teams held training camps during the past few weeks to try and unearth the local Indian talent. Of course, this was the first IPL auction where uncapped Indian players were actually allowed to go up for auction. Now, James, in my opinion, Kings 11 Punjab made the shrewdest purchases at the auction, picking up Mitchell Johnson, George Bailey, Glenn Maxwell, Shaun Marsh, Thisara Pereira, and South Africa's Buran Hendricks, who was one of our top picks for the auction. Buran Hendricks, he's a South African left-armer, and he finished the Ramslam T20 just a couple of weeks ago with 27 wickets in 11 games. This week, Hendricks was also included in South Africa's World T20 squad, so it's been a lovely week for the young man, and we wish him all the best. Now, in terms of Indians, Kings 11 Punjab also managed to pick up Che Pujara, Virender Sehwag, Laxmipati Balaji, Rishi Dhawan, and Murali Kartik, which is quite a decent array of experienced T20 heads. They've also got David Miller on their books as the sole overseas player that they retained. And I think that in terms of overseas players, Kings 11 Punjab have really found themselves some shrewd picks who are all pretty much top drawer. On the other end of the scale, however, I think that the Kolkata Knight Riders will be riding into the sunset this season because their auction buys read like a who's who of Indian rejects. They've got Robin Uthappa, Piyush Chawla, Yusuf Pathan, Vinay Kumar, Manish Pandey and Gautam Gambhir. And in terms of Kolkata's overseas players, they haven't even really picked up any internationals who you'd look to as a T20 gun. That is apart from, of course, Sunil Narayan, who they retained a few weeks ago. Now, Kolkata also used their right to match card, Jacques Kallis, and he's always been the type of player who, apart from a couple of innings here and there, he's always struck me as more of a liability than anything else when it comes to T20. I think that he kind of hinders your all-round team selection, and at the top of the order he can often get things off to a slow start. Although granted, he did come very, very good in the IPL final a couple of years ago. Now, Calcutta picked up Jack Cullis for $900,000, where they could have had similar quality or better all-rounders, and for a cheaper price as well. Now, Corey Anderson, for example, he went to Mumbai for $750,000. Dwayne Smith went to Chennai for $750,000 as well. Or KKR could have also picked up Darren Sammy for $580,000. My personal preference would have been Thisara Pereira, whom, as I mentioned before, Kings 11 Punjab picked up for a bargain $270,000. So, dear listeners, the countdown has once again started to the IPL in a couple of months' time. I'm sure you're all looking forward to Eastern European cheerleaders dousing themselves in Pepsi as much as I am.
Home comforts, Nishant. Home comforts. Left arm moustache news now, Nishant, and Mitchell Johnson has continued his incredible form as Australia won by a mammoth 281 runs in Centurion against South Africa. He took 12 wickets in the match, bowled ferociously again. Before the game, South African batsman Faf du Plessis actually said, "We faced him before, we're ready," but clearly forgetting to add, to get treated by Mitch the way underage showgirls get treated by Silvio Berlusconi. Michael Holding actually thought this was a wonderful match because he said it now really signals the end of the era of batsman's domination with Mitchell Johnson coming back so well. So South Africa there have really had the whispering kiss of death, Nishant. So looking forward to the second test. How can they breathe some life back into themselves?
Well, obviously Michael Holding hasn't been watching many Indian matches recently because I think the Indian bowlers are definitely giving some batsmen the kiss of life at the moment. But looking towards the next test at Port Elizabeth, I don't think that the South Africans need to worry too much or overreact either, because I think that they've been a lot of kind of harsh criticisms in the media in the fallout to the first test. It seems that having been the number one side for so long, to have been challenged on home soil has pretty much hit a sore spot with the South African media, and a lot of people are kind of hinting towards a possible change in the guard. But as I said, I think it's probably erring on the side of an overreaction, because Australia really did play out of their skins in the first test. And also, the toss turned out to be quite important. I think the Australians got the best of conditions, but that also only became obvious with hindsight, and I think that Graham Smith copped some rather opportunistic flack for that. Let's not forget that MS Dhoni won 7 tosses in a row in New Zealand and still didn't win a game. Nothing in that first test went right for South Africa though, and everything went right for Australia. Shaun Marsh and David Warner both had plenty of nicks and gloves that didn't go to hand, whereas South Africa had a few freak dismissals, especially with Alex Doolan taking a couple of ridiculous catches on debut at short leg. But what can South Africa do for the second test? How can they handle Mitchell Johnson? He's too hot right now. He's lava, he's magma, he is the Earth's core. Of course, in the long term, South Africa need a replacement for Jacques Kallis to handle someone like Mitchell Johnson. James, what I think South Africa need is a Dravid-like player, a fireman who will see off Mitchell Johnson's opening spell and just block and block and block. AB de Villiers said that facing Johnson became easier once the ball got softer after the 35 over mark. Now, I think Faf du Plessis has proved himself before in this sort of situation, and he's the man to fight these sorts of fires. In the first test, he got 1 unplayable ball in the first innings and a pea shooter in the second innings. But I wouldn't mind seeing Faf du Plessis open the innings. We've seen that he is a brave batsman, he's got the concentration, he has the tenacity, and he certainly has the defensive technique to last for hours and hours. Meanwhile, Alvaro Peterson hasn't been too handy with the bat, and he's the type of batsman I like to describe as a cup of coffee. Not because he's tall, elegant and sophisticated, but because his innings don't seem to last longer than the time it takes for me to pop to the kitchen and make an actual cup of coffee. James, Alvaro Peterson hasn't scored a century in 15 innings now and looked really very shaky against Australia's paces. But again, looking towards the second test, perhaps it's not the time for knee-jerk reactions for South Africa. It's not as if they have a wealth of batting talent on the bench. They've got Dean Elgar waiting in the wings, but you have to ask, would bringing him in for someone like Alvaro Peterson promoting Faf du Plessis to open, would that really improve South Africa an awful lot? It would pretty much be as big a gamble as letting Alvaro Peterson stay there in the first place. Also, Ryan McLaren has been ruled out of the second test with a Mitch-induced concussion after he was hit on the head by a bouncer, and it looks like Wayne Parnell might come in for him as a like-for-like replacement. Overall, I think South Africa don't need to worry too much for the second test. Dale Steyn also in the first test. I said nothing really went right for South Africa, but on the first morning, Dale Steyn was taken ill with food poisoning. He still managed to pick up 6 wickets in the test, so it'll be really interesting to see whether he's regained enough strength to really have a go against Mitchell Johnson and match him blow for blow. And that brings us to the end of another episode of Radio Cricket. Thank you very much for joining us once again. Do make sure you check out our SoundCloud page. That's soundcloud.com/Radio Cricket. We have over 50,000 of you following us on there. You can also check us out on iTunes. Just search for Radio Cricket, or check out the links on our website, alternativecricket.com, our Twitter page @altcricket, or James's personal Twitter page @PavilionOpinion. I'm Ishant Joshi, and I leave you with the thought that it's one of the universe's quirks that if you're a Pakistan cricket fan, life can never get so bad where it gets to the point where it can't get any worse. And I say that because this week, both Kamran Akmal and Shoaib Malik were recalled to the World T20 squad. It's like the 15th sequel to a horror movie franchise that you thought ended 20 years ago.
And I've been James Marsh, and I leave you with the words of Harsha Bhogle, who this week has expressed concern that only one man is winning games for Australia. Well, Harsha, I would say at least that's better than India, who have 11 men losing them. Goodbye.
I think it was a very poor performance, one of the worst things I have ever seen done on a cricket field. Good night.